Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Help Wanted, Hiring and Retaining Good Employees, presented by PBI-Gordon and taught by Tyler Bloom. My name's Lisa Wick. I'm a Senior Manager of E-Learning Programs here at GCSAA and will be today's moderator. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before I turn things over to Tyler. We are recording today's event. You'll receive access to that recording as part of the follow-up email. Your audio is muted in this system, but we encourage you to ask questions as we go along. You can use the raise hand button on the GoToWebinar control panel. There's a little tab with an orange rectangle at the top that maximizes that control panel. At the bottom, there's the raise hand button. If you want to type your questions in that control panel, you'll see the question answer box and you can type in there, and that's also where you'll see a handout of the slides that you can take notes on today. Today's session is eligible for 0.1 GCSA education points. At the end of the program, we'll give you a code that you can use on the association's website to record those points. We hope you find today's webinar valuable. It's brought to us in partnership with PBI-Gordon. With a full line of herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, growth regulators, and other products, PBI-Gordon Corporation is a national leader in the professional turf and ornamental management industry. Today's title is a little bit different, Help Wanted. Tyler Bloom is our presenter, and he is an owner of an independent consulting firm focused on search, career, and workforce development. He attended Pennsylvania State to study turfgrass and then worked his way up to become superintendent at Sparrows Point Country Club, a 27-hole private facility in Baltimore, Maryland. It was there that he developed a reputation for staff development and training. And during his tenure, he instituted the first Youth Apprenticeship program for golf courses in the state of Maryland. He has acquired an executive certificate from Cornell University in Talent Acquisition and is a very sought-after speaker regionally and internationally. He also has written for turf industry publications, including Golf Course Industry and Golf Course Management Magazine. Please join me in welcoming today's presenter, Tyler Bloom. Tyler?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lisa, and appreciate that everybody over at PBI-Gordon for putting this on. Very relevant story right now. The golf season is winding down for many parts of the country, but our friends in the South, their golf season started to pick up. So really talking about the recruitment and retention cycle that I think a lot of people are facing with right now. I mean, it's top of mind for me and my business. I work with clubs all over the East Coast, from Rhode Island down to Florida, as far west as Washington, Las Vegas, California. So it's a hot topic everywhere, topic of discussion. Always hearing people asking, hey, do you know of anybody, an assistant manager, entry level skilled position, equipment technician? So it's kind of all over the board. So I kind of wanted to give you a summary of my observations. Having been a superintendent, it's one thing. I think when you see things at your own facility, but then when you expand out and you start to see trends and themes and success stories and, additionally some failures, I think it brings a lot of credibility and some practical solutions here. Sometimes very grassrootsy, maybe not super corporate HR, but I think I'll give you some solutions today that'll help you in your efforts moving forward. Just see if I can get the slides to move here. Lisa, I'm not sure if I have access to this.
You'll have to click the first time and then you can use your mouse and keyboard. There you go.
There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so when we think of, I guess, talent development or talent management, there's a lot of different areas that are involved in that. I think what we're going to focus today is mostly on recruitment and training. And some of these other topics, you probably hear me speak at another session throughout the winter, other webinar offerings. So really the state of the workforce consistently, no matter where we recruit. And like I said, we work with about 50 facilities across the country. And the reality is, the cupboard's bare. There's just not enough people coming into the workforce, specifically in hospitality or the trade sector in the turf industry. So I think clubs have to be self-aware of that they're kind of already up against it. when they start a recruiting process. And a lot of clubs really, I think, wait too long to start the recruiting efforts. For many of them, it's just posting to Indeed.com or Craigslist, in February or March and expecting a ton of applicants, and that's just not the case. Rising entry wages. I mean, I'll have a statistic here a little bit later, but we've seen in most of our searches that may have started at $13 or $14 an hour early in the year are now offering 15, 17, upwards of $22 an hour for no experience. And so I think that trend's going to continue into next year. So as you're in the budgeting process right now, I would really make an effort to communicate that to your stakeholders, your general manager. And most of the GMs I interact with are pretty engaged with that discussion point. So it's not something they're unaware of, but making sure that you're fighting for your department and those entrance wages are competitive. Not because the peer clubs are paying that. A lot of times I find superintendents, club managers, and boards are comparing to other clubs, but it's really what the competition is. Burger King, a couple miles down the road, is offering $17 an hour with no experience. So how are you as a business going to be competitive to them? Obviously, the lack of educated and industry trained workers is a major issue in terms of filling specialized positions from spray techs, irrigation techs, up to assistant managers. So, what are some solutions for that? And that obviously has a downstream effect when you don't have a good management tree and being able to train new entry-level people. It really all falls on the superintendent. Turnover issues, which really have, I think, been a challenge, not just this year and last year, but really for the last 5 to 6 years, especially when wages haven't really been competitive. And conversely, the wage compression aspect, that you have people that have been on staff for 3, 4, 5 seasons, maybe longer, and now they're seeing those entrance wages coming up, and they kind of feel sort of shortchanged in the fact, what are you doing for them? So clubs are having to really adapt quick, and really clubs aren't positioned to make quick changes because the governance models that most people have to deal with. And then, lastly, I think it's kind of where most of my clients sit right now, is just burnout. I mean, it's just been a long season. The weather's not been the greatest, as typical in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast parts of the country, and people are just tired and they're ready to kind of put recruitment and staff development type things kind of to the side and just recharge. So we'll talk about a couple of those things here throughout the presentation. But, I want to start it off and kick it off by just saying there's really no silver bullet to recruitment. Like, I'd be sitting here and selling you snake oil if I said I had all the solutions, because every place we work with really has customized circumstances, whether it's pay, whether it's they're in a remote location and they just don't have the volume of people in their area. They may just not have this sort of workplace culture that's going to be attractive to people. And they may not have a system or know of a system to have an effective hiring process. We find in a lot of our engagements that we're best served to really point people in different directions and give them different networks to post their jobs to. But we come to find that just getting a job description in place and getting it posted is really difficult for them because of time. And they may not know how to prioritize their time to a hiring process. And then consequently, as you move throughout a hiring process, we see oftentimes managers, not just superintendents, chefs, clubhouse managers, don't really prioritize sourcing, interviewing, following up with candidates. So consequently, they lose those people to better opportunities, or they just feel they're not, people aren't interested. So there's a lot of forces kind of going against people in this industry right now. And I think the biggest thing that I try to instill with new clients or anybody we work with is you have to make the time. If you're going to be fully reliant, not just me, but any recruiter, headhunter, I think you're set up for failure, because you've got to take ownership of part of this process. Again, we could talk about the wages, we could talk about the training aspect, But if you're not really willing to designate time, you're always going to be in this hamster wheel of trying to chase an unachievable goal. Again, this hiring season is so short because of the seasonal nature of this industry, that if you're not designating the proper resources, the proper experts, and the proper processes, you're always going to be fighting an uphill battle trying to bring people into the workforce. So I really challenge most people as they think about recruitment to designate the time. And what is that? What amount? It's going to vary week to week. But I think you have to have a central coordinator within your departments. And I typically recommend that it's your assistant managers. I think the assistant managers have a huge impact in this because they really are the ones working with the workforce day in, day out. They can kind of sense of who's going to be a good fit for the team, who they can build rapport with quickly. And so I think it's important to give them that ownership in this process to really be the central coordinator for you. Because I can tell you on a week-to-week basis, we try to set up interviews with the superintendents often or the department heads, and they don't respond to us. Here we've gone through the sourcing, the interviewing, the vetting, and we can't get them to that final step because the hiring manager is getting pulled in too many directions. So I think you got to delegate that. I also think you've got to include more than just one or two people. So if it's a human resource manager, could be a core staff member, try to have multiple people in a hiring system so it doesn't fall on just one person, because people are going to take vacation, they're going to have projects that they're managing, they're sick, and time is of the essence in a hiring process. And so I like to use kind of the terminology is, to create more time for yourself, you can't. You've only got 24 hours in a day. And so you've got to multiply time. And you do that through delegation, automation, or elimination. So many people that we work with don't have a concept of the tools and the technology that's out there to help you organize a hiring process just to start. So I really advocate for using an applicant tracking system. The two ones that we're really comfortable with and I advocate for is a company called Recruity. They have their own mobile app. You set up the job posting, it goes out to Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Monster. It can go out to Facebook, a lot of different integrations. And essentially, it's sort of like your virtual assistant. It keeps you accountable to the applicants that are coming into your pool. So traditionally, most clubs, they post it Indeed, and then they manage the hiring process through Indeed. So they forget about an email, they forget about following up with the candidate. We're using an ATS system like Recruity. You can basically automate from start to finish. It'll send you notifications when applicants come into your pool. You can set calendar invites for phone screens, interviews. If you use additional kind of screening tools like personality assessments, you can integrate that all from there, all from your mobile phone. So when you're out in the field and you know that you've got a 12 o'clock appointment for an interview, it'll send you a reminder. So when that irrigation blowout happens, you don't forget about it. And the nice thing is you can share these tools within your staff. So kind of think of like Task Tracker really for hiring. So again, and we help companies set this up, I guess you could say, as I'm a brand ambassador for both of these companies because we find these tools really fit well. You can set Zoom interviews all from these applicant tracking systems so that, there's a lot more versatility in the hiring process now than versus just feeling like you have to be a part of a, in-person interview. And again, the other thing that I like is the fact that you can share it with a hiring team. So you're delegating some of that responsibility, but you still can check in and kind of see how things are going. Granted, I will tell you, job boards in general have limitations. A lot of people are really dependent on Indeed or Craigslist, even to a degree Facebook, and it's just not a really proactive measurement to recruit. You're just basically using active candidates, and we find that the best candidates are usually people that are already in a job and they're being referred to you from, whether it's an employee, it's a vendor, it's maybe somebody that a recruiter has come into contact. So, again, these applicant tracking systems, in my opinion, just help keep you focused and accountable to a process, where most people, it's very ad hoc. So here's just an example of what one of these would look like. So from your phone, kind of centralizes everything to a nice little app, and you can communicate to those candidates all from here. It'll crowdsource their resume, references, and again, you can set up a hiring flow all from this central site, so it takes it off your plate. As you can see here on the picture on the right, and this is just an example, a sample pool of candidates, and you can kind of see where each person's at in the hiring process, so you can keep it organized. I can't overestimate how important having something like this can be for superintendents. A lot of clubs use applicant tracking systems, but it's typically the HR manager. The actual hiring managers aren't using this, and they're cheap. Recruiting is typically anywhere from $60 a month up to $100 to $200 a month, just depending on how many positions and what sort of automation tools you want to use. So just by default, you're going to save money because it's going to post to all the different job boards that you would have to pay individually. So that's one tip I would say in an investment that you should make this off season. I would really consider this. I think the expectation, I think the expectations of hiring managers right now is that there's this sort of unicorn workforce and large volume of people coming into the golf turf industry, and that's just not realistic. And I think sometimes there's a false narrative that people don't want to work. That's not what we've found. We have found, over the course of 6 to 7 months, we've been able to fill positions as quickly as 7 days, maybe sometimes as long as 45 to 60 days. A lot of it really has a function of how you're sourcing candidates, which we will get into. But I think, there's a large percentage of why clubs aren't moving forward because they got no system. They have no structured hiring process. So it really starts to me with these 4 simple things. You've got to benchmark what the expectations for the job are and the kind of characteristics you're looking from individuals. And I'll often hear, oh, I just need a general labor. And then they get a pool of people, and some of those candidates might have 0 transferable skill sets. And you might find people that have 2-3 years of construction, manufacturing, trade type skill sets. And the expectation is, well, that should be who we're marketing all the time. And so they're eliminating people for general labor roles. They're screening them out pretty quick there's no real benchmark for that. And a lot of it, I think, is just because maybe people don't feel comfortable having to train as much as they do for entry people. But to be honest, that's the majority of the workforce. It's not like there's this large volume in these metro markets or remote markets of people with golf course maintenance experience. So you're going to have to train people, maybe with no professional experience either. But you got to benchmark what success is, and we'll get into that a little bit. Obviously, the sourcing aspect is a very timely process, and you can spend a lot of time and maybe still get little results. But I'll give you some examples of things and of where to look and how to look and how much time to really spend sourcing candidates. The interviewing process. So you've got candidates into a hiring funnel. They're interested. How do you streamline that process so it doesn't become a 2-3 week thing? You need to really move quick. So candidates at this point basically have endless opportunities. How can you make it attractive and streamline it so they're acting on jobs quick enough? So we'll talk about that. And then lastly, onboarding. I mean, the retention aspect to me is probably even a bigger issue than the recruitment side of it. So keeping people engaged, giving them some sort of vision for opportunities to grow. And there's a variety of formalized and unformalized strategies on that. But I wanted to give you some metrics here as well, because I think it's important. People kind of ask this question of what's the volume of candidates coming in? Is there any sort of is there a pay rate that entices people to come? So like I said, we've done about 50 searches in a wide range of salaries, and this is specifically to entrance type roles. And most clubs probably fall in that $13 to $15 an hour range. But I would say early on, it was between this 11 to 14. And we would typically see maybe on average one applicant coming into, if all your efforts were just based on Indeed and Craigslist, you typically see maybe a candidate every 10 days. And that might last for 30 days tops, because then you got to refresh those job postings to make sure that your listing, is at the top when people are looking for new jobs. We saw a little bit of attrition when that pay range is between $15 to $19, where you'd see an applicant somewhere between every 3 to 5 days. But on average, I would say 5. And then we worked with some companies that either started at 20, or you saw the scale move up to say, we got to be more attractive. And so we've got to be more competitive to the local market. And so we're going to offer $20 an hour. Maybe we have less total positions, but at least we'll be able to fill 1 or 2, maybe 3 key spots. And yeah, we definitely saw that uptick of resumes. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I posted a job for a facility in Philadelphia metro market, and their pay was between $18 to $24 an hour. Within 24 hours, we had 15 applicants. So, I would be remiss to say pay doesn't have an impact, but I want to give you some statistics to realize what you're up against. And you start thinking about time to hire. This is just applicants. This doesn't even mean that they're going to be interested and go through the whole process. So when you start thinking about that on a larger scale, that's why hiring and recruiting to me is really a 12-month gig. It's not going to just be for the months of March before the season starts, February, or August when school students go back. So you got to keep that in perspective, and why it's important to really delegate and focus and prioritize hiring 12 months out of the year. Again, I use this terminology, this unicorn workforce that's expected. Oftentimes companies engage with me, I think, looking at Tyler Bloom Consulting as a temp agency, but we're really in year 1 of, I would call, the search and placement side of my business. And it takes time to build that sort of rapport with candidates and build up a database of just places where you need to post, because it's all based off the community. But I really struggle and being realistic that the volume of people coming into this industry, even for servers, bussers, offsite operations, I just don't know if this unicorn workforce of people exists. So you're going to have to create it. You're going to have to create it with people with minimal experience to none. You find the needle in the haystack periodically of somebody with that formalized training, a little bit of a background in landscaping, but I think to put all your eggs in that basket, I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of frustration. And I think we try to shoulder some of that frustration from employers and try to be realistic with them. As I said, you can outsource talent acquisition to a temp agency, a recruiting agency that has, candidates that are for all different industries, and you get what you pay for, right? And you can use that kind of model to maybe trial people into your workforce versus kind of waiting and during an application process. So, there are solutions. It's just, what are you willing to pay for? I just think that being realistic with your hiring managers and your human resource, if anybody I have empathy for is the human resource departments, because they're being asked to do things like payroll, compliance, performance reviews, and then the expectation is that HR person's also your sourcer, your interviewer. It's just a lot to expect for one person. So I think everybody's got to kind of work together and use all available resources. So, we're coming into the time of season when people have a little bit more, I guess you could say, mental capacity to breathe and start thinking about planning for next year. Don't wait until February to do this. Start this process now and do little bits each week. But you really have to assemble your interview team. And this is an example that I recommend for most is you got to have the superintendent involved to some capacity, the HR to make sure compliance issues and the job postings are legal. and that they're part of that process. An assistant manager and even a core staff member who really understands the culture and the success traits of those people coming in. So really benchmarking the profile that you're looking for, establish what success looks like. And that's going to be different for every facility. And there might be variations of that general labor job that you're trying to fill. And there's different qualifications. So just making sure you're broad, but you're also focused. You want to be inclusive, but also detail the specifics that you're looking for. And you got to create a compelling job description, right? So you're selling what you're about. You're selling your values of your organization. You're selling a vision for that person of what it would be like to come there and how you can help that person reach their personal and professional goals. For some people, it's just a paycheck. And that's the reality too, is there is a portion of the workforce that's not career minded, and that all they are looking for is consistency day in, day out, something closer to work, like being outside, so there is a portion of that workforce that's just looking for a paycheck, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you really want to create that job description that's going to attract motivated, high quality candidates to come to your company, and a story that will resonate with them. Oftentimes, I think benchmarking that has to come from the people that are in those roles right now, not from the superintendent specifically, because that person's not the one that's raking bunkers and has a hard time really, I think, relating to those individuals, even though we've all kind of been through that process, and we all came up through the industry by doing string trim and bunker raking. The workforce has changed, so how they perceive that job is much differently than 10 to 15 years ago. And then just make sure that the wording that you use is going to be consistent throughout the entire job posting and through the hiring process. You have to use common terms and language, so you're not talking over people, and that you're presenting information in a consistent way each step of a process, whether that's from the phone interview, the in-person interview, or then to the offer as well. Because when they get onboarded, if it's a job that's much different than what they signed up for, they're going to be out the door, in less than 7 days. And sometimes you have that, right? Sometimes it's just not a good fit. You do everything that you can. You use structured interviews, statistical data. You've got multiple people that are a part of the process, and sometimes people just ghost you. I'll be honest, we deal with that where we set the final interview, and the person no calls, no shows. The person gets hired by the club, has a phone conversation, agrees to the position, and they don't show up for the first day of work. So I think being fair to yourself and just, again, being realistic with that's the challenges that you're facing right now. So trying to just keep a level head on that is really crucial. But again, wanted to give you some compensation data. So obviously, as part of that job description, you have to really think about, is this going to be attractive to what the workforce is looking for? And I see right now, if you're paying less than $15 an hour for any position within a club, I think you're at a disadvantage. And no matter what you try to do to try to bring people in, you're going to be really focused on a small demographic of people that are interested in those kind of positions. I work with a facility, and I'll leave the name of the club out. I work with a facility in Metro DC, and they have a challenge of they're in a remote location, and it's hard to get people to come from their local region because there's not the volume. And conversely, for anybody to get there, it's probably about a 30 to 45-minute commute. In a metro market, they can pretty much go anywhere they want for $15 to $17 an hour. So this club has to consequently pay an extra $1 or $2 an hour versus the prevailing wage, just because people have to commute there. So you have to consider some of those niche aspects of your location, for job seekers in general. And that really sometimes can skew what you offer them just to be competitive. It's not unheard of to offer transportation, offset transportation costs, shuttle services. Those are some of the barriers for employment that you have to really think about in terms of developing compensation. In terms of that job description checklist, make sure you focus on what the essential tasks are of the job. You've got to really think about the goals and outcomes when that person comes in there, what are they contributing to? And then also, what are the outcomes of them by doing the job that you're asking? What's the vision for them? Not in 2 years and 3 years from now, but 90 days from now, 180 days from now, and 360 days. Sometimes I think we lose sight on what really motivates and drives people to come to a golf course. And what I find is it's being outdoors, as cliche as this can be, being outdoors, working with their hands, being a part of a team setting, working with Mother Nature, having a high attention to detail. And using some of that terminology, I think it actually help you attract the kind of people that are going to be a good fit for, golf course maintenance. Obviously, you want to consider the briefcase, their experience, their education, their skill sets, and lastly, why should they work for you? More important than anything is what are you going to do for them? You're in a position of having to sell to, basically a buyer's market. Candidates have the leverage, and that's not changing this year. It's not going to change in 2-3 years from now. They're always going to have the pick of the litter at this point because of where everything is at in the state of work. So conveying what your values are in a job description is super critical because it can connect with people that have things such as integrity, teamwork, innovation, people that want to be in a growth oriented and advancement oriented operation. Those are the kind of things you should really try to get into a job description as concise as you possibly can be, but that stuff resonates. And then I think it as well helps you, the hiring manager, make decisions based on your values of what you're looking for in employees. And those are things that you can use in an interview itself to ask what's important to you, what are your core values, and see if there's anything that resonates. You can use those same sort of value statements when you do reference checks. Is this a person of integrity? Is this a person who's honest? And so those are just some of the small little things that you can do to boost your job advertisements or postings, because that's what they really are, is advertisements. All right, so we've got the job description. We did the benchmarking. The job's now being posted. And so what we find in our interactions with clients is really making sure you establish some sort of internal sourcing and referral system. Now, previously, I think it was just a function of, hey, we got openings, come work here. Well, as you see now with sign-on bonuses, retention bonuses, referral bonuses, that's now got to be part of a program that you offer your employees as a form of compensation. So having existing staff members talk about the workplace culture, they're going to be your #1 generator for leads, for candidates. So if you don't have a good existing workplace culture, that's also something I would really focus on over the next 90 days is, hey, how are we going to make this a better, more accommodating, more flexible, empathetic type work environment that people want to be a part of? And don't be afraid to ask the person that just started there 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, in the last 2 years. Sometimes they're going to give you the best feedback that you need to incorporate into those job postings. Now, my recommendation, and you can use this as a benchmark, and some places are going to be higher or lower, but I would set up a referral program where if an employee brings in a friend, family member, whatever, that they're going to get a $500 upfront fee. If it's $50 to $100, it's just not enough. It's not going to entice them. But if they see that they can offer, and get a $500 fee, that might be half a paycheck or a paycheck just in that. Set benchmarks for that new employee and tie them into that person who just referred them as part of a leadership and mentorship aspect, so they hold that new employee accountable for you, and create that sort of 590-day benchmark, right? Because if you're hiring me as a recruiter, I'm going to set a very similar kind of setup where you're going to pay me initially for doing the sourcing for you. I'm going to get a placement fee, and then typically after 90 days or 6 months, I'm going to get some sort of a retention fee for that person staying on board. So you're really incentivizing your employees to help you build the culture and handle some of the training for you. Again, there's no way you're going to be able to go at this alone. You're going to need as much help as you possibly can. And then again, I would set another sort of incentive that after a year, that they get another $500. Again, that might seem like a lot on the surface, but if one person refers a colleague or a potential candidate, it's saving you money. Because the cost of replacing an employee is anywhere from $4,500 to $7,500 per person. So I think you're really smart in business sense to create some sort of a referral bonus program for your existing employees. One of my college roommate is a recruiter for AutoZone, and they have a program out right now for general public, not even employees of the company, that if you refer a trucker, a person with a CDL light trucking license, if that person stays on for 90 days, you get a $5,000 referral bonus, right? So that's not crazy to think that you can create this sort of system with vendors, cross departments, members, anything creative and outside the box. I've seen it. I thought earlier this year when I started seeing sign-on bonuses for $1,000, $2,000, I thought that was crazy. Well, that's the normal now, and I don't think that's going away. But I think, again, your best sort of building that candidate base and that lead base is going to come through existing people. In terms of external sourcing, here's a great, and it's by no means the end all be all, but this is a playbook that I typically use when I go club to club. And I try to build out that network and email database of contacts from these kind of associations or organizations. And in every situation, I would say you're typically going to find high schools, some sort of college or university within let's call it 30 minutes to an hour drive. You're going to have things such as a career one-stop, which is fully funded by the Department of Labor to have, resources and people in your area to represent not only the candidates looking for jobs, but employers looking for candidates. So they try to match those two audiences together. So use that career one stop. And if you go on Google and just put career one stop in, you'll be able to find where your local agency is. You can post jobs for free through them. You can do job fairs. This year I participated pretty much in a job fair a month in all areas of the country using the career one stop. Are they 100% effective that they're going to give you an endless stream of candidates? No, but it's another resource for you in this whole playbook of different groups. I do want to hit on the reentry programs. So incarcerated people that are looking to re-enter into the workforce, a lot of times they work with these agencies that essentially act as like a job coach for them. And they help those employees and those candidates re-enter the work site, and they teach them things like employability skills, computer skills, basic training that really is applicable anywhere. And in Baltimore, for instance, one of the companies I work with there, we've just started a relationship with this reentry program because in the middle of the summer, July and August, they're telling me that they had about 40 individuals that are ready to be employed. It's just a function of finding the employers that would take a chance. Now, there's obviously some political and governmental type things within the clubs that would have to be okay with that. But again, it's a resource that I think a lot of people don't consider selfishly. And again, when there's nobody knocking at the door, you're going to be forced to do things that you didn't think were normal before. I really consider, given the seasonal nature of what we deal with, to explore H-2B and J-1. Now, I know a lot of people don't have success with that H-2B process because the cap that is put across the country, but I think it's worth exploring because I don't see the seasonal workforce, establishing on a consistent basis year to year. I think it's worth your time to explore that process. And again, after this call, you can feel free to reach out to me. I work with two different agencies, one in the New England territory and one in the Mid-Atlantic territory, that helps businesses all across the country in J-1 international visa students and H-2B placements. And I will also say on the seasonal side of it, I think it's really critical that you learn to establish a relationship with a temp agency. Was speaking with a company this morning that has done that, and what they found for themselves is they were spending so much time um, from August, July to make sure that they had people to replace their high school students. They're getting so bogged down that it was just more seamless to have a relationship with a temp agency for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Yeah, they were probably paying higher wages for that level of skilled employee, but at least they're having bodies. And essentially the way they looked at it is they had an opportunity to trial those employees into this work site, and they had people there to help accelerate things like bunker raking, string trimming projects, maybe not operating equipment, but they essentially had those people there as a trial basis. And there are times when they hire those people full time, or they tell the agency, this person's not working out, send me somebody different. So instead of scratching your head and hitting your head against the wall because you're not getting applicants, sometimes you're gonna pay for it one way or the other. So something to consider moving forward for your seasonal needs specifically, because I didn't really hear too much of a challenge in my travels that clubs weren't getting the typical high school students for the summer seasons. It's really the shoulder seasons where they're trying to maximize. Again, we just kind of talked about that temp to hire situation. And here's a program I want to talk about. When we think of diversity and inclusion, you have to go places not where you would normally go to find people. You have to go and find people at the places they hang out. And it's hard to really put yourselves in that situation when you don't really understand their motivations, drives, what excites them, where they like to hang out. So having partnerships with representatives from the Department of Labor, the Career One Stops, they're going to know where different ethnicities hang out, where different agencies that they work with to pool those types of people. So example I'll give you is in Montgomery County, Maryland, I work with it's called an immigrant task force, and it's made up of employer associations, non-for-profit associations, and different individual employers that really try to engage their candidates that have come from different backgrounds. Could be Hispanic, could be Jewish, could be Asian American, whatever. But they try to really help those candidates and those people find viable employment options. So those resources do exist. It's just sometimes you got to go where those people go and try to find a way to relate to them. One of the programs that I'm a huge component of, and I think a lot of people associate my service with, is the development of apprenticeship programs. And the reason that is because it's often being advocated from different agencies, like I just spoke about, to those underserved communities. An apprenticeship really is just a formalized training program. Most of us have some level of training programs that we offer our existing employees, but it's just a formalized program to really upskill the workforce, and finding different ways and different communities of people to engage with employers. That's a nice connection point, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I go back one step. One of the things that I learned, not just as a superintendent, but even in this year of consulting, is that I think we have a really interesting opportunity right now to bring in new people that may not have been engaged in the golf industry. So a number of my placements came into our portal because they love golf. They love being outdoors, and they just never knew that this career even existed. And at least from my perspective, when you bring people from different backgrounds, could be in finance, could be in manufacturing, different industries, they're often going to bring different perceptions and efficiencies into the work site, and sort of recreate your workforce is not always a bad thing, versus having the standard Indeed applicants or, your existing workforce that maybe doesn't have the motivations and drives, and they need to change themselves. In terms of sourcing, and I just kind of made the comment that most job seekers have no clue this even exists. Again, it could be for culinary, outside services, groundskeeping, whatever you have, that they just didn't even know that this would exist. And I'll give you an example. I conducted a talent acquisition search for a club in New Jersey, North New Jersey. And within 30 days, we had over 100 applicants. And we were getting resumes from people with major financial backgrounds, HR recruiters for big name companies, law firms, amusement parks. I mean, the person that was hired actually had a talent acquisition specialist role with Six Flags in New Jersey. So it was kind of interesting, but it was consistent in that process how many people said this is super unique. I never thought of a golf club. We play golf. My husband or my wife plays golf, played it in high school. We just never even thought of this as like a potential avenue for career. So I really believe, and we haven't certainly figured out the metric yet, but using social media to market positions to passive job seekers, I think has to be a part of your overall talent acquisition plan, management plan. And it's not super expensive. Oftentimes for clients, I'll post a job, for $100 a month. It's cheaper than what you'd pay a boosted ad on Indeed. And typically for $100 a month, you're going to get a reach of 1,000, 2,000 people all within a specific area. So I think there's more to be learned on Facebook marketing as a reliable source to aggregate candidates and passive job seekers. So if you're not using social media to tell your story, I would really consider that as part of your overall plan for 2022 to tell your story a little bit. And it certainly doesn't need to be overwhelming where you're posting every day, but celebrate the successes of your staff, show the environment on the golf course, in the kitchen, have referrals. I mean, talk about a great place to have referrals from your employees is creating a social media page and outlet for them. They're going to love it. We've helped design career branded pages for employers. And again, talking about that app Recruity as an applicant tracking system, you can create a career page to send out to all those different networks, to post on Indeed, to really showcase what it's like working a day in the life scenario at your facility. And that's an easy little tool that your employees can use to refer to their friends. I would tell you that outreach is sort of an area that I don't think people either A, comfortable with, or they don't know where to start. Just having your own job fair, you can create that through as virtual event on Zoom. We typically do that once a quarter for our employer partners, and we connect to all these different agencies and just make them aware. Again, are you going to get flooded with 100 applicants? No, but you're going to funnel down the people that actually generally are interested. So creating events like that, participating in outreach like the First Green program by the GCSAA, it's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity because your competition's doing it. We network with different businesses, from Google down to the PNC Bank. Landscape companies are doing this as well. So it's going to become part of your fabric within your club. You're going to have to spend just as much marketing on candidates as you probably are marketing for potential members. Again, this is just a list of different resources that you can attend. We talked about Facebook marketing and in the social network, and that's really where a lot of people hang out, and a lot of that referral from external sources can come. So now you got applicants come into your funnel. Now you're starting the interview process. And I think it's really important to have a structured aspect of how you're going to approach each person. So that way you get into a rhythm. It's just like your day-to-day maintenance operations. You got to have a system and habits, and have some habits that you can repeat. So it makes the process easier, more digestible. You have an expectation for the end result and kind of know how to screen people out. If your interview process is you get the application, you call the number, the person talks to you and you say, I'm ready to hire you, well, I can guarantee you're going to be very disappointed. But you've got to set a system of timing What's a structured interview look like in terms of the questions you're going to ask, the people who are going to be involved in the actual interviews, whether it's phone, a Zoom, or in person. Self-selecting people out by doing that and having multiple people involved is actually a great way to narrow your focus so you're not wasting time on candidates that aren't going to be a good fit. And then obviously reference checks. Like, you have to go through the full cycle process. And if you leave a stone unturned, you're going to be disappointed. We find that if we go through all these different checks, by the point that that person's ready for an in-person interview, it should be a conversation and not trying to figure out, is this person the right fit? It should be more of a conversation and bringing them on site for that individual to assess the work environment. We should pretty much know by that final interview whether they're the right fit or not. They should be hireable. And so some of the things that I would recommend thinking about that interview process is really that first phone screen, to kind of have some general dialogue, kind of have some questions about their experience, maybe why they left the job, what would their coworkers say about them, just to kind of develop some initial rapport. And then we've typically set up Zoom interviews because it's easy to access. You can do it out in the golf course, in your office. Multiple people can contribute. If you're busy in a meeting, your assistants or the other hiring managers can participate, and they don't have to, they don't have to be necessarily on-site presence. And again, having a consistent list of questions for those candidates. And listen, you can go on Google and search top questions to ask. A lot of times for us, it's basic. Start with, tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in this position? What are the skill sets that you feel would transfer? We'll ask behavioral type questions, things that maybe didn't work so well in our work environment, and then also about those values that are so important to us, to really ask those behavioral type questions to see what their response is in a similar environment. I think when you do those kind of checkpoints, and then again, you follow up with reference checks, you should have a pretty clear indication as they come into that final interview, whether they're interested or not. And some people might say, man, is it worth spending all that time? It seems like a lot of steps, but I think you end up weeding out people who don't belong there, and you're going to end up saving yourself time in the long run. At least, again, that's our experience. And again, because we're solely designated to doing this, we can typically run through this within 24 to 48 hours. I find that if you get an applicant today and you don't have some sort of a communication to them, whether it's an email, a text message, a phone call within 24 hours, you might as well forget it, because they're going to move on to another position. So you have to move quick. There used to be a saying that I was taught, hire slowly and fire quickly. I don't think that's the way anymore. I think it's hire as quickly as you can, but have a process in place that you can follow. I think if it's very ad hoc, and if you make exceptions because somebody looks good on a resume, they sound good on a phone screen, and you don't follow through background checks, employment checks, drug tests, whatever that may be, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. There has been a shift working with employers that they're softening drug testing specifically for marijuana. I see that trend continuing. Just because I think recreational marijuana usage in the country is becoming more adopted. And I'm certainly not sitting on a GCSAA webinar saying, bring in people that are smoking marijuana, but I'm just telling you what I see. Drug testing is becoming much more lenient in the country. So just keep that into consideration. I think a tool that employers don't use enough is personality assessments. Now, there are many tools out there, whether it's Disc Profile, a lot of clubs use a program called Job Align or Talent Plus. Predictive Index, which I'm a certified partner with them, is a great tool for companies to use. And I think it's hard for superintendents to use that information practically on a day-to-day basis. But when it's a part of a screening process and you have an applicant pool and maybe it's down to 2 or 3 people, or maybe you get that one applicant, those personality assessments can really help you onboard that person and also give you insight as to what's going to make them tick, what are some of the skill sets that they're going to bring, and how they're going to interact with your team. And that to me is equally important in an interview process, is how are they going to integrate with your team. So again, I think a reasonable time frame that you should shoot for is the second you get an applicant, you've got to communicate to them within 24 hours. If you call them, leave them a voicemail, and they don't return your call, send them a text message. We typically find most people respond to text messages, and if they don't, then they're really not interested. It's rare that people that have been interested in a job don't respond to text message. So you might have to do more than 1 or 2 communications, but if you miss out after 48 hours, I think it's going to be hard to find people interested in specifically general labor jobs. Onboarding. So you've now hired that person, and we'll spend a couple minutes here, but that first 30 to 90 days is the most critical time. And you've got to have a system in place of training that's consistent, easy, digestible. There is no substitute for good training, even on the simplest tasks. I mean, having a map of the golf course, oftentimes I found entry-level employees just didn't know where to go. And so much time was wasted on trying to show them where hole 1 was versus hole 7 and how to get back to the shop. But make sure that they have some level of checkpoints, their first week. They know somebody who they need to report to. We used a buddy system. So as a new employee came in, they got assigned to a specific core staff member. And that way they kind of felt comfortable with somebody that they could go to, in their first few weeks of employment. Just making sure they've got their work shirts, they have their work uniforms. Do they know when lunch is? Do they know what's the process and procedure for a malfunctioning a piece of equipment? How to use a radio? I mean, sometimes we miss those simple things in an onboarding practice, and we get so fixated on, oh, we've got to get this person trained on mowing greens and go in the right direction. Sometimes it's really the simplest things for people that really make a difference. I think it's really important to have a really fun and welcoming environment, in the sense that call that person the night before they're starting. Have that onboarding buddy call them and introduce themselves, and spend time with them in their first day or two. Maybe just showing them around the golf course. It's so hard when you're behind on work and you've got to try to get things done and the job done, and yet you've got to spend time on onboarding and training and showing people. It's super frustrating, and it can be, you feel like it's compromising and you lose time, but you're going to have a good impression with that employee first. You're going to make them feel comfortable about coming in and safe about being in the work environment, and you're going to get them off to a good start. And I think it's really hard to do that in the middle of the season, but that's why it's important to delegate that to an assistant manager. Having that kind of buddy system will help you delegate some of that work, so it doesn't always fall on you. One of the best onboarding forms I saw came from a gentleman by the name of Matt Powell up at Dedham Country and Polo Club in Massachusetts. And he's got a checklist of all the things that employees should be doing their first day through their first 30 days. And it sets a foundation and clear expectation, not only for the candidate or the employee, but actually for the hiring manager, of what they need to do to make sure their employees are off to a good start. And I know we're kind of running out on time, but training isn't just the application of the jobs that they're doing, but it's teaching them on employability skills, making sure to punch in, punch out correctly. It's giving them that educational knowledge about what golf course etiquette is, and I see that kind of training being offered more and more by clubs, and that they're doing a better job of engaging people into what the etiquette of golf is and the culture of golf as part of their initial onboarding process. Because most people, as I said, aren't coming into this with a background in the game, golf course maintenance. So any way that you can educate them, GCSAA webinars, GCM magazine, Golf Course Industry magazine, Golf Dome, whichever way you have to engage people on the environment of golf has to be a part of your onboarding process. Now, the last two slides I'm going to focus on really are, what are the skills employees are looking for from their managers? So this was a study done by the Predictive Index where they surveyed about 2,000 employees across 15 industries. And there's a variety of different statistics that came back and recommendations for businesses how to adapt to today's workforce. Again, after we're done with the session, if you like that report, feel free to email me and I'll send you a copy. But here are some of the things that employees value from their employers and their managers. So as you're thinking about developing your assistant managers, here are some of the soft skills that they're going to need to exude on a day-to-day basis. Because I find a lot of times turnover or disagreements within the workforce aren't because of the superintendent to employee. It actually is coming from the assistant manager down to the employees. And so you really have to focus on management development and sharing this kind of information with your assistant managers and your core team members, that they have to exude some of these skill sets and they need to develop this and be consistent. Just confidence. I mean, right now, given the state of where things are, that's why I said earlier, I think you're going to have to adapt to the reality that this is the new normal. Every year is going to be a challenge in terms of getting all your positions filled. So if you don't demonstrate that confidence that everything is going to be okay and that you're a team and that you're working together to try to solve some of these, I think you're going to lose trust within your staff, because I've seen it where maybe a supervisor isn't totally confident in the state of the club or state of the workplace conditions, and that confidence trickles down. And here's some of the things that, again, employees are saying about their managers, comparative to 2 years ago. Just the communication side of things and being transparent with people, consistent, being positive, can really, I think, drive retention rates, in a positive direction. I know we've kind of just gone over time. We didn't have a whole lot of time to talk about what I'm really passionate about is this apprenticeship program, but I kind of wanted to give opportunity for anybody if they have any questions. And again, I know we didn't cover everything here. I mean, this is we could spend all day talking about different hiring practices, best management tips. This is sort of just more of an overview of some tactics you should be considering moving forward.
And that was a lot of really good information there. Thanks, Tyler. If anybody has questions, now would be the time to submit those. The code that you want to enter for your GCSA external education points is 999-239-27-31624. And so you'll go to the GCSA website and enter that. If you're listening to this in the future, put the date you're listening and not today's presentation date. I want to thank Tyler for teaching for us today. I want to thank PBI-Gordon for making this available. We do have a number of upcoming live webinars that are showing there. As you know, we record these. And Tyler mentioned a number of different items. H2B, we recently did a look for a labor solution, a look at H2B for a labor solution that you can find on demand. He also talked about marijuana, and while marijuana has its own challenges, it's not the problem that we have with opioids, which has been a crisis during the pandemic. And we also, when you go to find a look at H2B, you'll see a look at drug misuse. Check that one out. But then onboarding essentials. We have an on-demand event on onboarding essentials that can help you set up a program if you don't have one. A lot of the things that Tyler hit on are included in that as well. And then you can see him in person. Come to San Diego. Tyler's going to be involved in a couple of different education events there. The schedule is up on the Conference and Trade Show website. Registration for that opens on November 2nd. Not seeing any questions coming in here. Tyler, you have any closing remarks for us today?
Well, it's listen, I empathize with golf course superintendents. I was one, so I know the struggles that they're going through. And I think you've got to ask for help. And it might seem like it's you're being insecure. Listen, you don't get the time, you don't get the bandwidth to handle this on your own. And I think the sooner you come to that conclusion, the better off you're going to be. And you might not be able to infuse all the things that we talked about today. But I think if you start with one by first off communicating to your general manager the need, your board of directors, your stakeholders, that if there's a need, you're going to have to find resources to help you source candidates and manage that hiring process. And you need experts' advice, not ad hoc advice. You're gonna need experts to help you in this because it's gonna save you in the long run. And you're gonna have to look at various pools of people and really try to adapt that into your specific niche, customized workforce and your operations. And in some cases, you might have to be upfront with people and saying, we can no longer do this as part of our day-to-day operations because we don't have the workforce to do it. And I can tell you, I work with a lot of companies that I think to some degree use me as a way of saying, see, now we got to pay people more because we even got a recruiter and he can't find people. And honestly, that's not the answer either because the wages are only going to do so much. You're going to have to find people that really align to your organization, your management style, and money's not going to be the only contributing component of attracting and retaining people. It's just going to get them in and a week or two later, they're going to leave because it's not the workplace that they thought.
I really appreciate that idea of knowing your values and communicating them. And I think that is something that can help more than anything. So we'll take that message away. Several folks have typed in, thanks so much for the information, Tyler. We appreciate you teaching this for us, and we appreciate PBI-Gordon for sponsoring it. And we look forward to seeing you in San Diego. Stay well. Have a great day, everybody.